Hi guys, Andrew's here with a new video. In one of my previous videos, I demonstrated a step-by-step guide to change the front brakes on Porsches, which saved hundreds of dollars for those who watched my video. So today, I'm going to bring you the other half of the cake, how to change the rear brakes on Porsches, again including both the brake pads and rotors. In this video, I'm using a Porsche Cayman as our subject, and you can apply what you are about to see in this video to your 911, Boxster, Cayman, Macan, and Cayenne. If you have a different car, especially a European car, you may also find this video helpful as long as your car uses Brembo calipers. I highly recommend that you have this video with you and use it as a guideline when you perform your own brake job. Before we start, we need a sturdy low-profile jack and 2 jack stands. We of course need to have our brake pads and rotors ready, as well as new brake sensors. However, if your brake sensors are still pretty new, you may save the new ones for later so you won't waste anything. The way brake sensors work is that they have a metal sensor embedded. They will eventually wear off with the brake pads and will eventually rub against the rotor, causing the common brake service alert to appear in your dashboard. In my case, my brake sensors were changed in recent maintenance, therefore I decided to continue using them in this video. To keep our hands clean, we need some gloves, an impact adapter set in my case, one 10mm socket, one 10mm hex bit. You may also want to have a T55 star bit, as the newer Porsches typically use star caliper bolts. A 19mm lug nut socket is required, and the leftover turkey blaster from Thanksgiving will come in handy. On the tool side, we need a torque wrench, a breaker bar, a rubber mallet, a needle nose plier, a regular hammer, some screwdrivers, and a brake pad separator. Lastly, you may also want a brake caliper hanger set, some thread locker, some 5 or 6mm metal sticks, and some metal brushes for cleaning purposes. If you don't have all the tools, I recommend that you check out your local auto parts stores. They may be able to rent or lend you some free of charge. First, get your gloves on. Make sure the car is off and open the front lid. Next up, we're going to suck out some brake fluid. The reason is, when we switch out the brake pads, we will push back the pistons in the caliper, thus push the brake fluid back. If we don't suck out some brake fluid beforehand, it may spill out from the tank and make a mess. Prepare some paper towels to avoid contaminating the car. And also prepare a little container to store the brake fluid. Now with our turkey blaster, suck up some brake fluid and inject them into the container. You want to suck up as much fluid as you can. Next, place a rock in front of the front wheels. Since we will be jacking up both rear wheels, the rocks can prevent the car from rolling. Before we jack the car up, we want to loosen the wheel lug bolts. Remember not to remove them. This will make removing the wheel easier, because after the car is jacked up, the wheels will rotate and make removing the lugs more difficult. Next, place the jack under the car. You want to place your jack under a solid structure. The rear suspension mounting point is a great spot. It is strong enough to hold the weight for this car. Jack one side of the car up nicely and steadily, and then place the jack stand under the car. The best places are under the standard factory lift points like this, which is also used for the factory scissor jack. Repeat the same procedures to the other side. Once finished, both rear wheels will be lifted off the ground. I recommend placing the jack under the jacking point because it provides an extra layer of stability and safety while you perform the brake job. Then, remove all the wheel lock bolts and take the wheel off. Now let's take a look at the brake. It is held together by a metal rod that goes through the caliper and brake pads. A metal pin is stuck in the rod to prevent it from moving. Therefore, let's first pull the pin out with our needle nose plier. And then, with a metal hammer and a 5mm metal stick, punch the rod out. Again, bit by bit, and take your time. After the rod is pushed out, we can see that the brake sensor wires are attached to the brake pads, and the whole thing is held by the thin metal bracket. This bracket is like a spring and has a constant tension, so be a little careful. Now, with the needle nose plier, clamp onto the brake sensors and pull them out. Wiggle them around and pull slowly, and once finished, the whole clip will be released. Trace the sensor wire toward the top. We will see that the sensor runs through this triangle cover. This triangle cover connects the brake caliper. Later, when we take off the caliper, this cover will also come off at the same time with the caliper. To ensure a smooth uninstallation, we need to remove the little screw that holds this triangle cover in place. And it is this little flat hex screw. It is made of a soft metal and I think it could be nickel. Now put on a 10mm socket, unscrew it and take it out. Caution, don't lose the washer. Next up, we can see that the brake pads are stuck in their places and won't fall out. This is because the caliper pistons have been pushing the brake pads, and over time the brake pads get closer to the rotor as the rotor wears off. To get the brake pads out, we will use the brake pad separator tool. Simply hold it in place between the two brake pads. Twist the handle to widen the gap. Before you know it, the brake pads will be pushed back enough and can be easily taken out. This is why we must suck up some brake fluid previously, because pushing the pistons back also pushed the brake fluid back to the reservoir. Now let's move on to the caliper. This Cayman has the newer T55 caliper bolt. And just to be clear, some Caymans or Boxsters still have the older 10mm hex bolt. Therefore, having both will be helpful. Caution, do not remove them just yet. They are the only thing that hold the caliper in place now. If we remove the bolts right away, the caliper will fall and damage the brake wires with its weight. Therefore, we will use our caliper hanger set and hook the caliper to somewhere solid. In my case, I had it hooked through the caliper and I hang it onto the suspension spring. Now we can safely remove the caliper bolts completely, and then carefully take the caliper off. And here is the brake rotor all exposed in front of you. It is held by two little screws at its center. Use a suitable screwdriver to remove the screws. Be careful, you don't want to strip them. And if it is too tight, you may want to use an impact driver instead. Once both screws are removed, you should keep them if they're still in good shapes. Some rotors also came with new screws, but you should still keep the old screws just in case. Well, use the new screws of course. Because this is an old rotor, it is quite stuck and tight in place. Therefore, we can use a rubber mallet to tap it loose. Don't hit too hard, you don't want to break anything. After it is loosened, we can easily remove it with our hands. Before we put our new rotor on, I recommend using a metal brush to give this axle a nice clean. This is to eliminate as much brake dust and dirt accumulated over time. Plus, a cleaner part is always a better part. Brush off the brake dust on the caliper as well. Now our star of the show is here, a beautiful brand new brake rotor. This nice Brembo rotor came with shiny new screws. Therefore, I will be using them here. Okay, time to put it on. Oh, this thing is heavy. All we need to do is to locate the two screw holes on the axle and align them with the screw holes on our brake rotor. Press the new rotor in place and fasten the screws. Now we need to see if we need to adjust the brake shoe. Pull the handbrake and see if the rotor is tight. In my case, the handbrake was very tight and the stopping power was good. Therefore, no adjustment is needed. If you find the handbrake less effective, you should adjust the brake shoe now. There are plenty of videos on YouTube that teach you how to do it. Time to put the caliper back in place. It is highly recommended that you use new caliper bolts to install the caliper back on. However, in my case, those bolts are relatively new. So what I did was to apply some thread locker so that they will be tight. This step is optional, just my personal act. Remember the brake caliper hangers from earlier? It is time to remove them. Now a simple step. Hold the caliper in place with one hand and use the other to twist the bolts in. We can use a breaker bar or torque wrench to fasten it. Set your torque wrench to 63 pound-feet or 85.4 Newton-meter and lock it for safety. Tighten the bolt until you hear a click like this. Next, let's install our new brake pads. They should slide in easily and fit perfectly. With both brake pads in, it is time to plug in the brake sensor wires. Sometimes it is easily done by hand, but if you find it difficult, you may use a hammer and stick to gently push it in. Remember I said earlier that the metal bracket had a constant pressure? Yes, this little thing is very hard to press in. Therefore, we can use a metal stick to hold it in place while pushing the rod from the back. Make sure that the little hole on the metal rod is not concealed, as we still need to put the little pin back in. Once we secure the metal rod, we can hit it with a hammer to push it through the caliper. Don't forget this little pin. Let's stick it back into the metal rod. And now let's put that little screw back in with the washer. Yes, the screw you took off from the triangle cover. Do not tighten this too much as it is a soft metal and can easily strip. We're almost there. Hold your breath and put the wheel back on. Use the 19mm lock socket and fasten the wheel lock bolts. Don't tighten them all the way just yet. We just need the wheel to be sort of secured in place. Now we're ready to lower the car. First, we need to remove the jack stand. Use the jack to jack the car a little higher so you can remove the jack stands. Do this to both sides so that no jack stand is under the car. Lastly, slowly loosen the jack and lower the car. Set your torque wrench to 96 pound-feet or 130 Newton-meters. In a star pattern, tighten every single wheel lock bolt until you hear a click like this. We must now switch the car on and check for any warning. No warning light. Awesome. Push the brake pedal a couple times so to get the pistons moving and the brake fluid flowing back into the reservoir. Come to the front of the car and inject the brake fluid back into the reservoir. You may want to bleed and flush the brake fluid, but I don't think it is completely necessary, and there are many videos on YouTube that teach you how to do that. If you successfully got to this step, congratulations! You have done the whole thing yourself, saved hundreds of dollars, and achieved something new in life. But wait a second, we are responsible citizens, so we must also clean up all the trash and mess we made throughout the process. Protect the environment is definitely a part of this tutorial. Some audience asked about bedding in the new rotors in my previous video. So I had a conversation with my mechanic friend to find out if it is necessary. The short answer is, if you're driving normally in the streets, a brake bed-in is not really needed. In fact, improper bed-in may cause damage to your brake rotor, resulting in vibration to the brake pedals. Therefore, unless we're going to track our cars, we simply just need to drive normally, drive safely, and feel the stopping power. Anyways, that was it for the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I recommend that you have it with you as reference for your brake job. Give it a thumbs up, comment, and share with your friends who may need it. And please subscribe to my channel for more videos in the future. Thank you very much for watching, and I will be seeing you soon in the next video.